The gentleman from Salem, Mr. Habeeb.
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the nomination.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, members of the body, I think all of us agree that there are a lot of different important things that we do down here in Richmond. I have oftentimes said, though, and I've heard members of both bodies or both sides of the aisle say, that probably the two most important things we do are to pass a biennial budget and elect judges. And that's judges at every level. Judges are the level at which more citizens interact with our government than any other level of government. Judges make opinions, judges enter orders, judges interpret laws in ways that will affect generations to come. And Mr. Speaker, we have an imperfect process, but frankly, if there's anybody who has observed how other states elect judges, ours is actually pretty good. Every state, someone complains about the way they do it. Every state's got a way they want to add politics or take away politics or add the General Assembly or take them away. But at the end of the day, whatever you want the system to be, we have a system that has worked for a long time and has given us, bar none, the best the best judiciary in the country. And Mr. Speaker, while the process is oftentimes flawed, I'm the first to admit that this process has been more frustrating than any. This process has dragged on longer than many of us would have liked. This process has become more divided than many of us would have liked. And this process has maybe gotten away from the true questions that this body is supposed to ask. Mr. Speaker, I voted for former Justice Roush when she came before this body some days ago. I was encouraged by her nomination and was happy to support her. But over my votes, this General Assembly was unable to elect her. That nomination failed. And while I would have liked to have seen her got elected, she didn't. This body then advanced another extremely qualified candidate for that seat, Judge Rossi Alston. Again, I supported Judge Alston. He was a fantastic alternative to the first nomination that came before us. Again, over my objection, that nomination failed. So, Mr. Speaker, frankly, it doesn't matter how we got here today. It doesn't matter who's to blame. There's a lot of blame to go around, but today isn't the day for blame. Today is the day for us to do our job. We have a job to do, and today is that day. And Mr. Speaker, yesterday, finally, both sides of this body, both bodies in this building, sat down and began doing our job the way we're supposed to do it. Yesterday, we interviewed a judge who is not unknown to us, and he is not unknown to the statewide bar associations, Mr. Speaker. We interviewed Judge Steve McCullough, current Court of Appeals judge. And I have to tell you, Mr. Speaker, anybody who says that meeting yesterday was rushed and put together and not a representative of what this body can do wasn't paying attention, Mr. Speaker. It was respectful, it was substantive, it was bipartisan, it was thorough. Multiple members of both sides of this body asked real questions and got real answers. And I've got to tell you, Mr. Speaker, it was an honor to be a part of that meeting yesterday because I saw us doing our job. Mr. Speaker, Judge McCullough showed himself to be an extraordinary candidate. His resume is known, just very briefly, Mr. Speaker. He served the Commonwealth with distinction for over 19 years. He's been on the Court of Appeals for about 5 years now. He was a clerk on the Supreme Court for now deceased former Chief Justice Leroy Hassell. He's been an assistant attorney general, a deputy solicitor general, a solicitor general, a senior appellate counsel, and that is across multiple attorney general administrations, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, after that substantive, thoughtful interview process, he was unanimously qualified. Mr. Speaker, I was encouraged when I read the Richmond Times to hear the minority leader say, this is a, quote, good man, this is a humble man. Anybody who has questions about Stephen McCullough and his qualifications for this bench and didn't participate in that meeting yesterday and didn't ask those questions has lost the opportunity to object today, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, here's where we are. Like it or not, this is where we are. We have an opening on the Supreme Court of Virginia. Again, we know how we got here. We know what the governor did. We know every step of the way along towards that today. It doesn't matter how we got there. As I tell my kids every day, I don't care why it happened. What are we going to do about it? So, Mr. Speaker, we have an opening, and we have a constitutional obligation to do a job. We don't advise on judicial nominations. We don't consent to what the executive does. We elect judges. We have a highly respected sitting Court of Appeals judge who has been unanimously certified. And let me clear the record up from what we just heard a minute ago. This is not an unvetted candidate. This gentleman went before every statewide bar association in 2011, and at the result of those processes, we, both sides of this body, both bodies of this building, elected him to the Court of Appeals in 2014. He put his name in for this seat, for the Supreme Court. And again, he was vetted by every statewide bar association that was out there. So, Mr. Speaker, to pretend like this is an unknown judge, unvetted, unknown to us, who just showed up, is frankly disingenuous and misleading and is below the work that this body did yesterday in interviewing this judge. So today, Mr. Speaker, is the day for us to do our job. And today, Mr. Speaker, is more than about Judge McCullough. At the end of the day, we're voting on Judge McCullough, but that's not what this vote is about. This vote is about this institution and whether or not we can do our most fundamental job to elect judges. So, Mr. Speaker, any member of this body who sits in their seat and chooses not to cast a vote for a judge who everybody knows who is qualified, who is fully vetted, who has honorably served this Commonwealth for almost 20 years, and who has sat on an appellate court bench for almost 5 years, is simply abrogating their constitutional responsibility to the executive. If you don't want to do your job, I'm sure somebody else would be happy to do it for you, Mr. Speaker. But I hope today, putting behind all that we've been through, all the drama, all the messiness, again, it is not a day for blame of how we got here. It is a day for dealing with where we are. With that said, Mr. Speaker, I thoroughly endorse and hope everybody here will support the nomination for Judge Stephen McCullough.